Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. I'm happy to be here. It is Friday morning, August the 6th, and we're going to continue on. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. And I wanted to continue talking about codependency, which I didn't know a whole lot about. I always thought that I knew, a lot about codependency, just over the years hearing people talking about it and having people tell me that, maybe I might be codependent or somebody in my family might be codependent just because of the dysfunction that we grew up in. And I thought I knew about it. So I then, talking to a friend about 2 weeks ago, a good friend of mine, we were chatting about codependency, and I realized I didn't really know all that much about it. I hadn't read about it, and I hadn't studied up on it, didn't exactly know what the symptoms were, and thought I'll just take a look at it. So as I was looking around on the internet, I found a whole bunch of information about codependency and narcissism and all kinds of things like that are sort of related, and it's been so interesting. I hope that people are getting something out of the shows, and we'll be on for half an hour this morning. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and I already have a good friend in the chat room. Hello, Ava, Indiana, and good morning to you. And yeah, it's just wonderful to be able to do these shows. I'm not a professional. I don't have any counseling certificates, no therapist certificates. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows. And I just, as a survivor of child abuse, excuse me, I just wanted to be one more voice, for people out there, talking about child abuse. It's not talked about all that much. There are people talking about it, but it's not mainstream. The only thing we hear are the headlines. We see the headlines in the paper and on the news, these horrific, tragic cases where children are killed and murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers, or, if they're not killed, then they're in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, and that's what we hear about child abuse. We don't hear too much about the adult survivor issues. No one's really talking about what these children are going to possibly go through as adult survivors of child abuse, right? And so that's what I wanted to do, with this show, is just cover some of these things, talk about it from a survivor's point of view, and just to be one more voice out there for other survivors who have been through it, and, to say, look, I want to encourage you to reach out and get some help. Don't suffer in silence, just suffering on your own by yourself with no friends and no one to help you. I was there about 3 years ago, not reaching out, not getting any help, up until I was about 39 years old. And it's a hard place to be, let me tell you. So I just want to be an encouraging voice out there for people, just to say we can do this together, right? And so you have to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse are very sensitive, and a lot of people, if they haven't heard a whole lot about it, it can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. So just be sure you're in a safe place when you're listening to this show, as well as survivors who might be triggered, right? Because that can happen. So, and also young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, just to help you make up your mind and make a decision on whether or not you should be listening. I don't know where the players are now. They could be placed around on different websites and whatnot. And so I don't know how young the people are that are listening. And if you're a young person, you want to make sure you have someone listen to the show with you, just so that they can help you if you have questions or you're just not sure what we're talking about, because that's the whole issue. Abuse is not talked about all that much, right? And so we have to, you don't want to be sitting around all day wondering, well, what was that lady talking about? I don't understand. And it can be quite scary, right? So that's why, and also for your own protection, right? I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. Safety is number one. You have to keep yourself safe online. You have to realize that there are, at any given time, thousands and thousands of child sexual predators out there trying to get a hold of children. And they'll do anything. They'll say they're 12 years old, that they like to ride bikes or skateboard. They'll have a skateboard. They love to go to the movies. They'll try to become your friend, and then they have to meet them somewhere after school or at the mall, And quite often, young people, they don't realize that this is, until they go and meet this person, that it's an adult 30-year-old, child sexual predator who gets a hold of them and assaults them. You have to be careful. I really recommend checking out the FBI's website. The FBI has a great website for internet safety, for parents and for children. And you can just type into your browser FBI Internet Safety. It'll bring it up. It's a great website. And I really like the information that's on there. But there's lots and lots of good websites out there. And, get the information. Stay safe. You don't have to live in fear. best thing to do is just get the education. Learn how to keep yourself safe, right? So we're going to get right into the show, and we left off yesterday talking about codependency and patterns and characteristics of codependence, right? They said, just because we might relate to some of the material on this website, doesn't necessarily, we don't want to self-diagnose ourselves, right? That's what I was talking about the last few days, that, I might relate to some of this stuff here, but doesn't mean that I'm codependent. It's better to get a licensed professional to make that diagnosis, right? Because they would know. They're licensed. They're trained. You know what I mean? So I relate to a lot of this stuff, but does it mean I'm codependent? Not necessarily. So that's why I don't self-diagnose myself, but I do like to look at this stuff because it does give me sort of an idea of what people go through if they are codependent, right? And what any of these symptoms like post-traumatic stress disorder, DID, you name it, you know what I mean? Just the whole issues surrounding sort of trauma, right? And what happens to people if they survive trauma. Quite often they'll end up with post-traumatic stress disorder or these different sort of emotional issues, emotional problems and psychological issues because of the abuse or because of something traumatic in their lives. It doesn't even have to be abuse. You might have been a person could have been in a war. That's a very sort of lately been a problem for the veterans that returned from the wars and stuff. They didn't used to realize that they were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and that they do, and so nowadays there's help for them. People who've been in natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes, that's very traumatic. Anyone can experience trauma. Death in the family, an illness, a personal illness, job loss is actually quite often traumatic. Not being able to pay the bills, not being able to make ends meet, that's traumatic. I'm sorry, but it is. And it can be very stressful, and it can cause people a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems, right? So, even people that have not suffered abuse suffer from this type of stuff, right? And people who have substance abuse and, substance abuse issues and alcoholism and stuff like that, that they can suffer from this stuff too. So that's why it's good to take a look at it and just see what it's all about. We left off with codependency, and this is from www.saahelp.com and /partners_of_SA/codependency.htm. So that's where I'm reading this information from. And they're saying, they said codependent personality disorder is a dysfunctional relationship with the self, characterized by living through or for another, attempts to control others, blaming others, a sense of victimization, attempts to fix others, and intense anxiety around intimacy. And it is very common in people raised in dysfunctional families and in partners and children of alcoholics and addicts. So, that's sort of what is codependency, right? It's the disorder, they said here, that usually has its roots in deep feelings of shame that arise from child abuse. That's something they've written here. They said that shame is the feeling that you're not good enough, not deserving, inherently worthless than other people, bad, etc. Many people who were shamed in their history spend much of their lives feeling themselves in such a one-down position to others, lesser than, right? And they said other people compensate and flip over into feeling arrogant and superior, being needless, denying that they have emotional problems or emotions at all, and assuming a one-up position from others. So it can go either way. You can be the type that feels lesser than, worthless and not worth it, not deserving, or you can be the other one that goes to the other position, which is the one-up, like being better than, denying that they have any problems and they're just fine, and a bit arrogant and superior, and thinking that they don't have any problems and they don't have any needs. They're just doing well. So this is quite interesting to sort of take a look at this stuff. We went through this already. They talk about the symptoms of codependency, which is like controlling behavior, distrust, perfectionism, avoidance of feelings, relationship and intimacy problems, caretaking behavior, physical illness related to stress outbursts of rage, difficulty having fun, judging self, others without mercy, low self-esteem, often projected onto others. Like, why don't they get their act together? That was an example. Instead of saying, well, what could I do about myself? It's always kind of putting everything off on everybody else sort of thing. Difficulty in developing or sustaining meaningful relationships. Belief that others cause or are responsible for the codependence emotions. See, my mom, I think, was codependent because all this sort of really, I don't know, she was not diagnosed codependent. She was diagnosed manic depressive. But the thing is she displayed a lot of this type of behavior. Inability to see alternatives to situations, thus responding very impulsively. Constantly seeking approval and affirmation, yet having compromised sense of self. Feelings of being different, confusion and sense of inadequacy. Some of this stuff I can kind of relate to. Being either super responsible or super irresponsible, or alternating between these. A lack of self-confidence in making decisions, no sense of power in making choices. Feeling of fear, insecurity, inadequacy, guilt, hurt, and shame which are denied. Isolation and fear of people, resentment of authority figures. Fear of anger or bottling anger up till it explodes. That was me, and I still have problems with that. Hypersensitivity to criticism, being addicted to excitement, drama, chaos making, dependency upon others and fear of abandonment, avoidance of relationships to guard against abandonment fears. So all this stuff, I mean, it just goes on and on. They just the list. You can go. I hope you will check this website out, www.saahelp.com, and then /partners of _SA. /codependency. It's a great website. They talk about key behaviors, key identifying behaviors, which is some questions that they say. Do you find yourself trying to control a partner, relative, friend, employer, or colleague's sexual actions or thoughts? This would be if a person was, sort of having regarding their sexuality and codependency, right? They said, do you think things would be better if only you performed better sexually? Withdraw emotionally, have your mind on other things during sex or feel empty afterwards. Focus more on another person's sexual attitudes and beliefs or needs than our own, right? Use sex to try to repair relationships when they are strained. These are things that people can do, right? And there's a huge list there. There's a test here that we can take from Melody Beattie, author of Codependent No More. It's a checklist, and it says, do you feel responsible for other people, their feelings, thoughts, actions, choices, wants, needs, well-being, and destiny? Do you feel compelled to help people solve their problems or by trying to take care of their feelings? Do you find it easier to feel and express anger about injustices done to others than about injustices done to you? And we went over this already. We talked about all these. It's quite interesting. Here's one that I think is interesting. Do you stay in relationships that don't work and tolerate abuse in order to keep people loving you? And I think that's a huge question for a lot of people. A lot of people stay in relationships that don't work and tolerate abuse in order to keep these people around them that they think that they're going to get some love from. And there might be some love there, but it's not. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like my mom, staying in her marriage with my dad. It was loveless. There was no love there. Abuse, after 40 years of living with an abusive man, it would drive you a little bit crazy. She was basically driven crazy by him. And, their dysfunction, they just stayed in it because they just thought, that's what they should do, right? That is horrible, absolutely horrible to see people do that. My mom, she was abused as a child and then went on into this marriage with my dad, and it was, at first it might have been all right the first few years, but then it escalated and it just got worse and worse, and over the years, the destruction of our family, it was absolutely horrible, and I see that in other people. People staying in relationships, people staying in friendships or marriages or whatnot, and tolerating abuse in order to keep these people around them that love them. And quite often, that love just doesn't make up for it. Because we as children used to tell my parents that we loved them, but they could never say it back to us. You know what I mean? Because my parents hated each other, and they, were very hateful towards their children. And so us kids growing up, we'd be like, well, we love you. And they would never say it back. And then they would get mad because they'd be like, we don't have to say that back. And, blah, blah, blah. They were just mean and hateful people. So, they just tolerated and stuck around in that life. They were both born in the late 1920s, and they didn't know any better. They were just very ignorant, and their families were very ignorant before them and before them, right? So there was no, they were sort of, when you grow up around that and it's sort of generational, that's what you think your life is, and that's what you think it will be. And so, that's what, for my parents, that's what it was. They were told to get help, court-ordered counseling. My brother, my dad had beaten up my brother and he got busted for child abuse, and then my parents were both dragged into court, CPS and THS and whatnot. Then the court ordered them to go to counseling, marriage counseling and family counseling, or we'd be removed from the home, right? Because there was 5 children living in the home at the time. And so out of 7, 2 had already moved out because they were the oldest, and they were 16, 17 years old. They were gone. So the rest of us, my parents were told they were going to lose us, but my mom was crying to the courts. This is the stories that I hear. Please don't take our children away. We'll go to counseling. Don't take my babies. I love them. That's all I have. And then the court said, well, okay, but you have to go to counseling or we're going to remove them. So my parents went to 2 sessions, and then that was it. And then we moved to Canada, and out of sight, out of mind. And the abuse just continued on and got worse. You know what I mean? It was absolutely ridiculous that people would do this, stay in a relationship, stay in a marriage that is abusive and completely 100% abusive, just because they're trying to keep something together that they're finding that they might feel that they might get some love or reciprocation in. It wasn't healthy for them. It wasn't healthy for us, right? So then they go on to talk about codependency and recovery from addictions. And we went over that yesterday. And then we left off with patterns and characteristics of codependence. And we were looking at denial patterns. They're very interesting. These patterns, it says, these patterns and characteristics are offered as a tool to aid in self-evaluation. They may be particularly helpful to newcomers, people who don't know a whole lot about it like myself. Denial patterns, we were looking at that. I have difficulty identifying what I am feeling. I minimize, alter, or deny how I truly feel, and I perceive myself as completely unselfish and dedicated to the well-being of others. And that's denial patterns, and I think, we went over those yesterday, and, I know people that experience that stuff. I have difficulty identifying what I'm feeling. I don't have it. I never lived in denial. That's where we left off yesterday. So if you want to check out my archive from yesterday, you can. We were talking about all that. I minimize, alter, or deny how I truly feel. I don't, I know I'm not in denial because none of these I can't relate to any of those statements, but I know people in my family who are in denial, and they very much, I see this behavior in them, right? Low self-esteem patterns, it says, this is interesting stuff here. I have difficulty making decisions. I judge everything I think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. I am embarrassed to receive recognition and praise or gifts. I do not ask others to meet my needs or desires. I value others' approval of my thinking, feelings, and behavior over my own. And I do not perceive myself as a lovable or worthwhile person. And so many people suffer from low self-esteem, and not just people who were abused, This is, so lots of children, might have grown up in a good and loving home, and they still suffer from low self-esteem. This sort of thing can happen, but especially if you've been abused as a child, then there's going to be some self-esteem problems there, because especially if there was a lot of verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, right? That can really drag down people's self-esteem, you know what I mean? When you're being told that you're worthless, or this is what I heard, growing up quite often, that I was worthless, and other names, which I won't mention on the air, right, because it's just not polite. But, that I was no good, I was rotten, and I was evil. Right, I was told I was evil. Our whole family was. It wasn't just me. My parents were abusive to all of us. It wasn't just me. They would. That's how they talked to their children. So if we did something that they weren't happy with, or they were mad about, and then they got mad at us and over disciplined us, which is quite often what happened. Their corporal punishment was, the type of abuse of discipline that they like to use. Problem being is that there was anger and rage behind it, so it turned into abuse. And when you're raging and you're beating your children, you're not thinking about what you're doing, and you're causing all kinds of harm to them, bodily harm, right? And so, both my parents were manic depressive. They were also had anger problems, anger management problems. They hated each other. And so, when it came to the kids, we were just a problem. We were just always a problem, and we had to be dealt with very strictly and very harshly. So if my mom didn't like something that I was doing in particular, if she'd get carried away and beat me up, and then if I complained about it, then she would say, well, you're just worthless and blah blah blah. And then I could quite often be beaten up again just for opening my mouth. So I learned just to not say anything and just take it and lay there and stay down and not obviously not fight back and not run, because I used to run too, and I'd get caught, and then of course that would be really bad. So you develop your self-esteem, right? You develop this picture of yourself on the inside, and you start believing that what they're saying to you, it must be true, that you must be bad, that you must be evil. My dad was always calling everybody evil because he thought that we were all from the devil, right? Or we were the devil, right? So it was always evil, everything. And my mom was mostly just very verbally abusive as far as calling people names and telling us to go to hell, and that we are going to hell. And they were very abusive people. They grew up like that. That's what they knew. That's what they understood, and that's what they put on us, right? But do I have difficulty making decisions? I would say no. I've always been able to sort of think things through. That's why I'm still here today, I'm sure of it, because otherwise I would have killed myself years ago. I've always been able to sort of think things through, which has been a blessing in my life. When it came time to making decisions where I might hurt myself or hurt somebody else, I always was able to think it out and not follow through with it. Thank God. You know what I mean? Because I had times in my life where, sadly enough, I wanted to hurt people, and because of the way I grew up, being abused and being violently beaten and shoved and kicked around, I was able to do that myself to other people, especially when I was a young person. So I didn't have any problem pushing people around, hitting people, threatening violence, threatening, verbal abuse. I used to have a really foul mouth until I was about 20, 21 years old. I used to talk like my mom, right? My mom taught me how to behave. She taught me how to abuse people. She taught me how to abuse myself, and she taught me how to be verbally abusive and emotionally abusive and psychologically abusive. My mom was my teacher. And that's the joke, and that's why this whole thing just makes me very angry, because people, they look at a child's behavior and they think, what's the matter with that kid? You know what I mean? It's like, take a look at the parent. The apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, let me tell you that. And my dad, you think about his sons, what they went through, my four brothers, right? The apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. My dad acts like he was a saint and that he never did anything wrong and he wasn't capable. He told me actually not too long ago, because he's almost 90 and he doesn't remember anything, and his mind was gone then, so it's gone now, right? My dad was out of his mind, trying to kill himself, trying to run down the freeway. He would run down the freeway in the middle of the night, sometimes in his pajamas, sometimes not, just naked, running down the road in the middle of the night trying to kill himself, because he had demons surrounding him all the time, right? He's a very psychologically disturbed man, and he's borderline schizophrenic. But at this particular period of time in our lives, he was so out of it that he doesn't even know what he was doing, has no idea how he was behaving towards his family. He would come home from church and he would call my mom names, and he would call her a whore and a slut, and that none of us children were his. We were all from the devil, or we were all from the milkman or the postman or something. And that he didn't want this trash. We were all just trash. And then, then he would start physically abusing his sons and beat them up, and then he would beat my mom up, and if I said anything, he'd beat me up. And quite often, I'd be on the couch complaining about the way he was treating my brother and screaming at him to stop kicking around my brother, because my dad just loved to kick my brother, and he loved to hurt my brother, Rob. That's why Rob killed himself when he was 33. But he just loved to hurt my brother. He'd be there with his white suit on, kicking the crap out of his kids, and I would be screaming, stop it, Daddy, and he would come and choke me and throw me around and slap me around, and my mom would be screaming, and of course the fight would be on between them. And this was Sunday at our house, Sundays, and I grew to hate Sundays. I really did, and I avoided them at all costs. And when I got older and started using drugs at about the age of 12, every Sunday that I got a chance to get away from the house and get high, that's what I was doing. And so, forget it all. Either drink myself into a stupor or just take a whole lot of drugs, right? and not come down for a few days. That was my life, you know what I mean? It was horrible. It was absolutely wrong what they did. They should have been arrested. One of my older brothers says when he left the house when he was 16 to get away from all that garbage, and he's one of the older brothers, and he said, that he thought they should have been arrested, and they really should have. When they were when CPS and DHS got involved, they never should have left us in the home. That was a big mistake, big mistake on their part. But some of us survived, and my parents didn't kill us; they just killed us spiritually. They killed us. They killed us inside. They didn't physically murder us, but they did. Their actions caused us to all really live this whole life of death, and that's why I wrote my book, A Life of Death: The Redemption. And I hope you will get a copy. It's available at Lulu. You can grab it from from my website here, Blog Talk Radio. The link is down on the very bottom of the page if you scroll all the way to the bottom. You can pick it up at lulu.com, Shear and Potter Books. Thanks so much to Sandra Potter and Donna Shear for allowing my voice to be heard and allowing me to break the silence and get that book out there for people. It was a blog, it was a public-facing blog, but they said your book, your story deserves to be a book, and it should be out there available for everyone. And to help people to realize that they can do it. You can come through hell and you can do it. So I know, we've all survived horrific things, and I know so many people who have. I grew up with people who have. That's how I grew up. I've spent my life like this, right? So it's so important for people to know that you can do it. I wish my brothers would have known that, because two of my brothers are dead because they couldn't take the abuse, and they never really got any help, and they never learned how to have a good life. They never learned how to make friends and how to cope, right? So that's why I'm just here to be one more voice, just to say, suicide is never the answer. We can reach out, we can get help. We don't have to self-sabotage and hurt ourselves and live this life of destruction because of what was put on us as children, right? And so that's why I want everybody to make sure you do get help. Just reach out and talk to somebody. I don't care who it is, and if you can't find somebody, call a crisis line. That's what those people are sitting there waiting for. That's what they're waiting for. They're waiting for someone to phone in, because they've probably been there too. It's people like myself that might be manning crisis lines, right? So it could be somebody like me who wants to devote their time and energy to help people, and it has been there, has seen it, witnessed it, and survived it. So, that's the thing, right? You want to get help and not suffer in silence, right? Get some help and make sure you can make some friends. I know I've met so many friends this last year, especially since I went public with my story. I've met so many people who, all these hands came reaching out to me when I started reaching out to them. And I have so many awesome, most wonderful friends that I consider my family, because my own family is not here for me. You know what I mean? They're dysfunctional. So I can't expect them to be here for me, and I don't. I don't expect them to ever be here for me. So in this area, right? They can't, because they won't face it themselves. So we can't heal together. But I'm moving on. I'm healing, and that's why I consider all my friends my family, right? So low self-esteem patterns. We'll get back to that. We have a couple minutes left. It says, I judge everything I say or do as harshly as never good enough, and that's something that I used to always do. So I relate to that. I used to always think that whatever I was doing was just never good enough, but that's because my mom was always telling me that I was not good enough and that I was not going to make it, and everything I was doing was useless and worthless. So she was always putting that on me. We'll continue on with this we'll take another look at this on Monday, and I hope you will check this website out, www.saahelp.com/partners_of_SA/codependency.htm. And there's compliance patterns, control patterns. What else do they look at here? Books and whatnot, treatment of co-addicts, all kinds of good information. So have a great day, everybody. We've got about a minute left, and check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website, www.dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. And there's all kinds of information on there. Get the signs, get the symptoms, learn this stuff. You could save a child's life. You have a neighbor kid, and you hear screaming and fighting going on. If you think that child is being abused, or those babies are being abused, you have to do the right thing and make a phone call. Because you know why? If there is abuse, you could save those children's lives. If there isn't abuse, they're not going to be removed from the home. I mean, we should have been removed from the home, and they didn't get us out of the home. You know what I'm saying? So they only remove them if they absolutely have to. But you can at least get them, alerted to the fact that that family needs help, and those children need some help, right? You don't want to read about it in the paper the next day that these people have killed their children. Make sure you learn how to report abuse. You know, if a child comes to you and discloses they've been abused, there's certain ways to handle it. So you can get that information from our website, or a free PDF download, the Child Abuse Handbook, compiled by Donna Shear and Sandra Potter. So have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourselves. We'll be talking to you again tonight. Dreamcatchers Talk Radio tonight. Donna Shear and myself will be on 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then again my show after that. So have a great day, everybody. Take really good care of yourselves, and I'll just keep you in my heart. Bye-bye.